This is Willpower.
We are here, Willpower Podcast. Mikkel Aaland, I'm so honored to have you here. We met at the Culture of Bathing in New York City, and you're just really changed the game with your book, Sweat. So many years ago. It's like decades of information and learning that you have brought to the table around heat therapy and sauna culture, and just the passion that you have for global travel to experience and explore is sort of second to none, really. So welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here, Kristin. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm opening with a question to just really that speaks to your origin story and the notion of all of these years of focused around Sweat, the book, your passion, your authorship, your photography, and really how we got to the point in the last, when did it launch, The Perfect Sweat?
Oh, Perfect Sweat just launched in January.
It's like moments ago. And just really what the impetus was for that, this sort of reinvigoration of everything from your book and leaning into sharing it in a documentary style show with the world. So tell us about all of that passion.
Yeah. This is great. What a good timing on this. I'm pinching myself. I wrote a book 50 years ago, literally 50 years ago, and to have that come back in the documentary series form is a dream. It's so exciting. It gave me a chance to not only revisit the work I did 50 years ago, but it gave me a great chance to share on a much wider scale this passion, as you call it, that I have. So I'm thrilled. This has been a long adventure, and it's been continuous, and I hope it just keeps going.
Yeah. What was the initial spark for you really to say, I'm just going to get out and discover all these places? For me, like one of the key moments that was so interesting in the documentary series is when you're like, you find the one bathhouse that you're like, oh, I was here, but it's no longer here. Just the building is there, and it's like so many years later, you could kind of compare and contrast one journey to the next. So like what sparked the initial sort of passion, questioning, interest in sauna life and the culture around the world?
So I grew up with a Norwegian father who made a bastu, which is the Norwegian version of a sauna, and that was totally familiar. And that was something that you grew up with. You think of as familiar, but then you realize that there's a lot more to it. And when I was in college, I started doing some research, and this is something much bigger than my little world that I grew up in. And, it's one of those things where I'm a journalist, I'm a photographer, I'm curious. And before I knew it, I was finding these types of bath all over the world. It was like, okay, the Native Americans had the sweat lodge, and you go to the Middle East and you have the hammam. And these are all very similar in that they're hot rooms where people go in to sweat. And it seems like it was a universal phenomena, but here we are sitting in America. I was sitting in America at that time, and people barely had even heard of the sauna, or certainly not the bastu. And I thought, what's going on here? The rest of the world knows something that we don't know. And it just became, it went from there. And it was like an epiphany to go, well, I'm just going to travel around and, see all these places and photograph them and write about them and bring that information back to my people, to America, and say, hey, look, wake up, everybody. So that was 50 years ago. And what an adventure it's been on. It was amazing going around. I spent 3 years traveling around the world as a young man, hitchhiking, sleeping in youth hostels, and getting by teaching English in Helsinki. And anyway, it's something you can do when you're young. So the book came out in 1978. It did very well until the AIDS crisis hit, and that was the early 80s. And, my dream was shattered because we really were, in the 70s, we were a very exciting time for bathing in America. There was a lot going on, and people were really rediscovering traditional bathing traditions. And AIDS just put a stop to it. Nobody wanted to go into public bathhouses. They were scared. And it just went quiet for a while. And that was a big disappointment until the 90s and early 2000, when things started to ramp up again. They started to get exciting again.
Yeah, people started to feel more comfortable, and sort of interesting too, like that AIDS pandemic and the crisis came around because there was this sort of understanding in the United States, or this like, the term bathhouse really was something that was being utilized more in the LGBTQ scene and what have you, versus in Europe when bathhouses were just existing, it was always about, cleanliness and prepping after the long week and taking care of yourself and community and all of that. So it's sort of an interesting, how do you see that nuance? Because you were over there so much younger and you knew about this cultural, happening that was since the dawn of time for hundreds of years that people were utilizing these tools. But the U.S., like, what do you think attributes the U.S. to having less connection to that? Like, we were more conservative over here, or what's our problem?
We don't have a bathing culture.
Yeah.
It goes back. It goes back probably to the early settlers, where people coming from Europe, especially like the Pilgrims, they were much more modest, so that they wore clothes all the time. They didn't bathe. Native Americans that met a lot of these early settlers were aghast at their smell, because Native Americans were very clean. They had the sweat lodge and bathed. So this idea that bathing really early on was not part of the American culture until we started getting some of the Scandinavian immigrants, and then they brought the bathing culture from the north here, and in little pockets all over the country. We had Finnish communities, for example, and like my father, Norwegian communities that had a bathing culture of their own. But it hasn't really been widespread in the U.S. The one thing that we do have, if you can call this a bathing culture, but it's the shower. And the shower really came about during the Industrial Revolution and in the late 19th century. And the shower really was perfect for the time because at that time people were understanding hygiene was important. But they also wanted things to be quick and efficient because, this is a time when people were busy making money. And so the shower itself really represents something that is very efficient. It's solitary. You do it alone, unlike a lot of the bathhouses around the world, bathing cultures. And then the other thing is it's superficial. You're washing outside of the skin, whereas most other baths, like saunas and sweat baths, clean you from the inside, and it's much more thorough. But the shower is very very efficient, in and out. It's very solitary, mostly, and it's superficial. So when you think about how a bathing culture really can be a window into a culture and define and show what the culture's about, it does speak to the American culture, which is superficial, quick and efficient, and solitary. So that the shower has been the dominant bathing procedure in America, but that's changing, and that. We witnessed something in New York in January that's really exciting. I think it was exciting for all of us that were there to the bathing culture gathering. Yeah. And I'm just thrilled watching what's happening right now. We are getting a bathing culture in America that the rest of the world, or much of the world, has continuously enjoyed.
Yeah, and the Renaissance, the Renaissance is real, which I really love. I think it's so inspiring, and it's so it's catching, right? We can feel sort of this hockey stick effect that's coming. I see it just with the business model across the United States and North America, and even in the numbers and looking in. I was at a couple days of going through stats on numbers, talking about how there's, in North America, there's 397. When we're talking about we went to World Spa the one day, so in Queens, but it's like the larger scale spas that are full tilt and, well over 10,000 square feet, et cetera. But there's like 397 of those. And I think, 368 of them are in Quebec or something. It's like, it's just like, it's all sort of central. There's more in Canada than North America, especially the North American market is just so ripe for this renaissance, and seeing more and more people come to the table with bringing these tools in. I wonder if you feel like what you see across the board is what I'm seeing a bit now too, which is like a bit of a mad dash to say, how do I work more sauna and cold and contrast and steam? And there's I don't want to say no one's intentionally doing this, but there's a bit of this like lack of homage to the European modalities and lack of thoughtfulness around the way that these saunas are built in some way, because it's just like, let's hurry up and get it done. Again, North American perhaps philosophy. I just wonder if you think there's a gap there, you see that gap, or what your hope is for that cross-section of people who are opening spaces.
This is such a great question. And it really, this question of sustainability, how we can keep this going, is really the heart of this. And when you look at a bathing culture that's very established and has been around for a long time, in Europe, for example, or in Japan, or in the Middle East, for that matter, any of these bathing, or Russia, the bath itself, there's three main components to most successful bathing cultures. And one is, the social. The social is a very big part of it. The way people get together, they gather in the space that's heated. Sometimes they're naked, oftentimes they're not. They have a towel or something, but they're still pretty vulnerable in the sense that we're not wearing a lot. And you're sharing this heat, which is transformative in itself. And so the social, what happens between people when they're heated and contained in this very healthy environment is magical. And we know that. Anybody that's been in these kind of situations with a group of people knows something special happens. So that's a social thing. And then the other thing that's going on is the physical. I mean, obviously, your body is being affected by the heat, and the heat is transforming you physically. There's all kinds of really good things happening to your heart, to your brain, to your skin. So these are physiological changes that we know are happening when your body is subjected to heat. And the sweat itself, we know that there's a lot of benefits to that as well. So the physical part is really important. It's good for you. The third component that most bathing cultures around the world have is the spiritual. And the spiritual is a little bit harder to talk about, especially if people confuse that with religion. But the spiritual is a sense of, you have a feeling of connectivity. When you go in there, the heat not only transforms your body, it does something to your spirit and your mind. And you're connecting to the rocks, the steam, the wood, the smells. You're actually connecting or I like to say reconnecting, because you've never been disconnected. We're always part of nature, but it reminds us that we're part of nature, right? Yeah. So this spiritual thing really kind of boils down to respect too, in many ways, that you show to the bath. The spiritual, the physical, and the social. When you have those three components in place, you have the possibility of a sustainable bathing culture. Now, of course, having said that, I worry because in America, we tend to shortcut everything. And I'm worried. I do worry. Of course I worry. I'm thrilled that this is taking off. I'm a little bit worried that it can become a fad and, something that passes, because people get excited and then it doesn't have the depth that I've just described, and then they don't go back. So I think one of our biggest challenges is anybody that really gets this, and like you and a lot of the people at the gathering in New York, we get that. And I think our job is to remind people and to steer people into that direction, educate people. And I hope that that's really very much evident in what we did with the Perfect Sweat series. Mm-hmm. Well, which you mentioned, which is a continuation of my work from the 50 years ago, and up to date. Now it's an up-to-date version of what's happening around the world. But I hope that people can see there what we've been talking about now and take to heart a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like a lot of the work that I'm doing in the space of the business I run with Sherpa Breath and Cold, and we're talking about thermal therapy, talking about sauna. Going over to the UK to get my beginner sauna master certification and all of that a year and a half ago, to really say, how do I bring better education around this, and just learning for myself, right? As a background, my background is sort of in the biohacking health space in many ways, and I've always favored a dry sauna over infrared, et cetera, but just really understanding how we can utilize the tool for both healing. And as I get older too, understanding that connection and community is the thing that is just ever present and so important. I talk a lot about on the show, you know, the next pandemic that we have, I think is really about loneliness. And so this is one culture that will really change the game when it comes to people feeling like they can be connected, that they can show up somewhere solo and actually be thriving with other people, because there's so much beautiful direct conversation that happens in those levels of heat and storytelling. And, you know, my hope is that there's more of that as we go.
Absolutely. I'm totally with you. I love what you just said.
Yeah, yeah. And I just, I'd love to see, is there some specific, like from all of the travels and all of the things that you've seen, is there some specific, let's just say cultural or sauna experience that is like stands out as one of your, I couldn't even say your top, but like your top 5, either because it was very quirky or just, you know, really enlightening and you were like, wow, I really resonate with this experience in this sauna.
Right. Well, we titled the series Perfect Sweat, and the subtitle was like In Search of the Perfect Sweat. So I was challenged with every episode. We had 7 episodes, and the challenge was to find the perfect sweat each time. And that's really a challenge, because for me, there's so many, and how do you, well, anyway, so it really varied. I got so much interesting information. There was one moment, because I would ask people, what's the perfect sweat? What's the perfect sauna or experience? And one of my favorite answers, I got lots of answers, and one of my favorite was a perfect banya. This was in Russia, so the word there is banya. The perfect banya is when you take time. And I thought about that, and I was like, oh, okay, you know, you can have all kinds of variations in the form of the bath. What kind of bath? Where you are. You know, there's so many variations there. But at the end of the day, time. That's the one thing that you can say really adds value to a bathing experience. Because what you've said is that this is important enough to me to give it time, and I really like that. That was a great answer. Other things that really excited me. I know that the Aufguss is pretty common now in Europe, and I'll explain a little bit what that is. I know you know what it is, but the Aufguss experience was just starting to take off in 21st century, I guess you could say, and it really wasn't part of my experience in the 70s when I wrote Sweat. But when I saw what Aufguss and what they were doing with Aufguss, which is so much about storytelling, what you just mentioned earlier, and bringing people together in this environment that you could then express stories through. It's basically like an act, like a play in a 10-minute short space, because you don't want to go longer than that, because sitting in a heated space, it's hot. But anyway, the Aufguss itself, that whole phenomena of the Aufguss is really interesting to me. And I think that's one of those things that when we get it more in the U.S., as it is in all over Europe now, I think that's going to really excite people.
Yeah. Do you want to unpack a little bit about Aufguss as you have seen it and the education around it? Aufguss
itself means like, it's a German word, and it's an old German word. And the Aufguss was the steam that came off the tea. People would often refer to that, the steam, Aufguss. But then when the sauna took off, started becoming popular in Germany, the German public sauna scene is really strong. And in fact, every swimming pool, any public space will have a sauna, and it's mandated by law. So they became very popular in the public space. But the Germans, being who they are, were a little bit concerned that anybody could go in and throw water on the rocks, because, frankly, it really can be quite uncomfortable to have a lot of steam coming all at once. So the Germans designated somebody they called a Saunameister. And the Saunameister's job was to go in there periodically, tell everybody what he's or she's going to do, and then pour water carefully on the rocks and get this steam, this goose, going into the room. Well, the Saunameisters started getting bored, and they wanted to do more than just put water on the hot rock. So they came up with ways of moving the towel around to move the steam. Then they started telling stories, and then there's a really famous, kind of a legendary man in northern Italy, Arthur Tum, who started challenging his sauna meisters to come up with stories, and he created the competition. So they started to compete with each other, and now we have this really developed, very developed scene where Aufguss masters or goose masters compete with each other for the best storytelling, and it's become like almost like Eurovision, where they have huge world competition at the end of the year, where all the Aufguss masters from all over the world come and compete, and it is phenomenal to watch. It is so interesting. Some of the stories are really stupid, I'm going to be honest with you, but a lot of them are really cool. And so imagine this, an event sauna that can hold 250 people. And in Germany, they're all naked. You don't wear clothes. 250 people, all naked, in a big hot room that's 210 degrees Fahrenheit. And then these wonderful performances that people watch for about 10 minutes. And then, a lot of clapping, and they go out, and then another performance. And they have judges that judge them the whole time. So it goes on for like 3 days. It's an amazing championship, world championship experience.
Yeah, and I think from the little bit I've seen and gotten to experience, I'm so grateful for as I've traveled around and seen in Amsterdam and on the trip in New York and working, getting to know the team at Othership and all of the different places and doing this sort of the most I can with like touring around to witness some of it at such a small level compared to what you have. It's so interesting because there is such diversity in the stories. Like there's some of it feels like very like costumey and a bit like, hokey, even some of it, and with so much love, I mean that too, and then some of it feels like really like, deep emotionality is in there. And then other times it's like so much showmanship that I'm like, are you really even circulating the heat? You're just like super entertaining me, right? Like there's just levels of the ways that people, show up based on what they want to share. And it's like to each, everybody will find, for every pot of lid, you find the sauna meister that you like the best or the Aufguss performer you like the best. And it's really wild to sort of see that and have it sort of lean into it as, I think it's like, I would say that, so much of that got brought to us currently just from this Othership connection. I mean, we've seen Aufguss being around, but really the Toronto locations and the push that they have into social media and the digital world. And I think the age range of like youth diversity and like hip culture saying, hey, this is here too, where there are many people that I run into that are like, oh, have you seen this place, Othership? They're doing this thing that no one's done before. And that's also interesting, right? Because it's just new to the US and it's based off, it's homage to this history that exists in the towel waving culture and the Aufguss communities. And now I know I wasn't totally clear that it was like, I knew it was the Germans, but it's of course, leave it up to the Germans to be like, we must create a role for someone who organizes the heat in a sauna.
Right. Very organized, and more power to them. Full disclosure here: if you go to Finland, the Finns really, in general, hate the Aufguss. I'm making a generality there, and the reason is it's so cultural. The Finns love to go to the sauna and just sit there quietly, and just be quiet. And they're not really very they're not extroverts in that way, and they just look at what the Germans do. Now it's all over Europe, not just the German, but they look at this performance and there's music and there's like you said, costumes, and the Finns are going, oh no, this is not our sauna.
Yeah, and I had a beautiful opportunity to go to Helsinki and speak at the Biohacker Summit and go to do that a couple of years and then go off to this like, they had a VIP and speakers thing that was in the woods and have someone run a sauna. It was much more like direct. Like you said, it was very quiet. There were only a few Americans there. Initially, the first day I was in there, I was like one of the only people in a bathing suit, which then you feel more outcast than even incast. And I'm like, I don't know what the appropriate response is here because these are people I'm like working with and speaking around, and we just don't. I'm not as modest as most Americans, but I also was like, is there some cultural norm that I have to stay in a bathing suit? All of that. But I will say, everything you're talking about with the Finns is so true. Like somebody after I got off the stage came up to me and was like very deadpan face, was like, that was the best presentation I have ever seen. You know, and you're like, you can't even, you can't tell. It's like so sweet. And I'm always like, I want to break into that because I bet that they're like behind closed doors, all like laughing and having a great time. But it's just a different level of a little like more stoic sauna culture.
And that's what I love is that the bath gives there's a space there. It's like an empty canvas, right? And as an artist, you can go in and express yourself any way you want. And each culture does that. With variations, of course. So you have the Finns with their particular way of being, and they're Finnish, stoic, quiet, and the Germans more organized and a lot more. They have fun. The Germans have a lot of fun. But then you get into other cultures. Like I've been with Native Americans and doing sweat lodge ceremonies, which is in a way it's another. There is a parallel with that in Aufguss in the sense that for me there was a medicine man who put the water on the rocks in a small sweat lodge and then did praying and chanting, and it could be said there's also maybe a little storytelling in the prayers and chanting. So there is a parallel there with Aufguss, but it's done in a different way for a different culture, and I think that's the beauty. And when you get into the Middle East and the hammam, which is some people know as the Turkish bath, there's a whole ritual thing that goes around that's different than other cultures as well. And what I've been trying to do is I'm trying to show bathing like a smorgasbord where you come in and you say, I really don't like the super hot heat of the sauna, the Nordic baths. That's not my thing. And I'm more into the kind of the lower heat, higher humidity of the hammam, the steam bath type phenomena, more sensuous, more quiet, more, you can choose because that if you just lay out all these different bathing traditions and cultures from around the world, somewhere you're going to fit. You're going to find something that really works for you. And that's what I've been trying to educate people is to say, okay, you've gone into a sauna at the gym and it had a carpet and it stunk and it was, horrible. But that's not don't stop there. That was a bad one. That's a bad example. So look around, and now finally in the U.S. we're getting so much more variety. In just the last 20 years, 25 years, public baths, variety of public baths, from the Russian banya to the Finnish sauna style to the hammams, they're all popping up, and we're getting the choices now that we didn't have before in America that Europe has long had.
Yeah. And the interplay between them all, I think it's interesting to see like Europe just sort of, I want to say that they're like everyone sort of plays nice in the sandbox, but there's still like this inter-competition of like our way is the better and who started it. And of course that still exists, but we just had Daniel Bondarenko, who's another person who attended that culture of bathing thing in New York, come out, and he's, background cultural banya, runs Banya Fest up in Minnesota. And it was just beautiful to have him come to the sauna on the property where I held this big retreat for breath and cold and sauna contrast instructors and coaches, and have him say, okay, I'm going to take this sauna, we're going to take the temp down, we're going to add all this steam, we're going to bring on all these herbal whisks and Vidics and all of that. And it was, I think, just as much of an education for me, which is what's so beautiful when you can put something on education-wise and then also be like, oh, here's this nugget of something that's going to give me even more education. But to be able to really present how banya culture is a bit different and how he navigates, temperature and steam and all of that differently with using the herbs and explaining why oils feel different than natural herbs. And it really was an eye-opening experience, I think, for everyone there, versus the mentality a lot in North America is like, if we're going to go hot, we're going to go hard and then just be like crushing our souls and then go home, which, look, there's a time and place for all of that. But that range of experience is so beautiful.
Yeah, and I love what you just did. You called it a banya, and I'm sure, because, this is another one of those things I've been working on for 50 years. It's nomenclature, and the word sauna is a Finnish word, and that word pertains to a particular style of bathing that grew out of thousands of years of use by the Finns. Mm-hmm. And now you used the word banya, which is a Slavic bath, which, yes, there's similarities, of course. I mean, the main heading for all these baths is sweat bath. I mean, they're all hot rooms where you go in and you sweat. So now you have underneath the sweat bath, you have the Finnish sauna, which we know, sauna. And now over here, you're talking about the Russian, I say Slavic now, Slavic banya. And the Slavic banya, similar, but a lot of different rituals, the routines, the use of, like you said, the beating, much more range of techniques for the whisking. So it's different. And then when you go to a hammam, which is actually just incredibly beautiful architecture, really different than any Nordic bath, but that's a slimmed down version of the giant Roman thermae, which at the time probably was the greatest bathing culture of all time, were these giant bathhouses that the Romans built wherever they went, had thousands of bathers. But in the Middle East, they shrunk those baths down around the 9th century, 8th, 9th century, and they became the hammam. And that's a hammam. It's not a sauna, but it's still a sweat bath. And now if you go down to Mexico, and the Mayans have had sweat baths, which is called, Temazcal is a Nahuatl name for it. It was different than, architecturally it's different, but it's still a hot chamber where you go in and sweat. And there's a whole different set of routines and rituals that go around the Temazcal. So I'm really big on nomenclature and like just like in wine, you would never call a Chardonnay a Chablis, or you're a Merlot, Cab or whatever. So if we educate people to understand the words and what they relate to, we're going a long way. Education is so important. I'm so happy what you're doing, Kristin, because this is it's critical to make bathing sustainable over a long period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing, I was just reading a short article yesterday on the styles of whisking or Vedic or, the other things where people are using herbs to sort of beat each other's bodies, for lack of a better term, but whisking each other, that there's a bit of a cultural, and I was like, oh, I'm speaking to you today. Let me ask the question. Yeah. If there's a little bit of a notion in sort of that banya environment of when the men are just together alone using the whisks, it's a bit more vehement and assertive versus when the women are, and it's a bit more gentle and about bringing out that essence of femininity, and it's not as aggressive as there's a bit more of this sweetness and women working on each other's bodies and collectivity and to try to, I think, connect and be in community as the female spirit. So do you feel like you've seen, I know there's so many co-ed experiences you've had, but do you feel like when you've seen anything around that banya culture that there's a little bit of a notion on the way the men do it versus the way the women do it?
Totally. And I had the most amazing co-host for the Russian episodes. She was incredible. And I really got quite an eye, into that world that you're talking about through her. Because she's really involved with the women's side of the banya and really trying to kind of balance out the male energy, which has been so dominant for so long. But even within the style, you're talking about styles, even between St. Petersburg and Moscow, there's a huge stylistic difference in the way they use the vanik and the way they beat each other. So yeah, you have variations within locations and then within genders. And I think many bathing cultures do have separate bathing for men and women for a reason. I do think, I don't want to get too much into this, gender thing, but I think there is a feeling among women, here I am talking and I'm a man, but my sense is that they're more comfortable with each other. And there's a little bit of a tension when there's a mixed genders. That's a generality, but that's just my sense.
No, but it does come up for sure. I remember the early days for 15, 20, more than that years ago. My experience, my first exposure to these types of experiences where it was naked bathing was in Korean spas. I mean, when I was 18 even. Mm-hmm. And it was oh, okay, I was threw myself in the cold water for 15 seconds and went, wow, and then just got out. Or, I didn't try to have any, practices and protocols in that way. But it was really about, okay, this is the first time, I'm on a table, I'm stripped naked. This woman's doing a body scrub. She's very, not that it's clinical, but it's very there's a sisterhood in there. And there's I'm cleansing you notion that feels very nothing nothing even, maybe perhaps my mother bathed me like that when I was, under 5 years old or something, but you just don't remember that, like the power of touch, the way that someone's like doing it to really clean you and like purify you is what I want to say, in so many ways. And that was something that always felt like an interesting trajectory to have that experience. Later on in life, I would tell people I would go to these places in LA or what have you, and they'd say, women that are more modest would say, so you're totally naked and someone's just like scrubbing you down all over your body. And it's like, and you feel like a little kid, in some way that we're being taken care of and loved up on. And I'm sure that the notion of women feeling like, oh, I would never want to do that with men around, and me saying it's all women, don't worry, was something that was like building into their safety mechanism, right? That they're understanding that it could be just shared amongst female, physiological females, if you will.
My co-host in Turkey used a word to describe things in the baths that we went to. She said, "You have to surrender," and I really love that. That was her kind of the take on the Turkish bath. That you go in and you just let go, and you have a telek or an attendant who takes care of you, like you were saying, but you have to let go, and that's a powerful thing to do. It's hard for a lot of people to do, that. But
and I think that there's a possibility of people helping, these attendants and the people who work with us. I didn't go into a session in World Spa, but I had a girlfriend who did at the conference, at the bathing event. That was like, wow, I felt a little emotional in there. I felt like some of my stress came off. I had a little teary-eyed moment. It's just someone was taking care of me in that way. That was like, there's no hidden agenda. It's just really about caring for another human, and it's part of the experience that you pay for. And it really, she was like, it just made a lot of difference in me letting go of some of the things maybe she was holding on to. So I think that those experiences are so important for people to, as they're going out to the smorgasbord of hot boxes.
Yeah, right.
Really experience. Yeah, so beautiful. I'd love to just get a little bit of insight too. I want to sort of turn the wheel a little to just the work you've been doing with Sauna Aid, because I think it's important to talk about and share. For you bringing saunas to communities that are in crisis, and just maybe sharing a little bit of the stories that you've witnessed and transformative power of the sauna in those kind of contexts.
Oh, thank you so much for bringing up Sauna Aid. That's really, it's where everything I've been doing all my life just comes together, and it's really exciting, and I'm so passionate about it. It started, so 3 years ago when there was the invasion of Ukraine, there were a lot of us that really felt strongly that we needed to do something to help the Ukrainians. And we got together under the auspices of the International Sauna Association and basically created something called Sauna Aid. And the idea was to ship or get saunas, portable saunas, mobile sauna units down to places in Ukraine that either have been bombed or blown up or were in dire need of a bathing facility. The Ukrainians, like the Russians, like the Slavic culture, have a very strong bathing culture. And in Russia, we use the word banya. They use the word in Ukraine, laznia. So we knew we were going to be working with a culture that would really appreciate what we were trying to do. So we immediately sent down a tent sauna, and then I drove in a container sauna. And then over the years, I've made 3 trips down there, bringing different types of saunas. We've had so many people donating and helping get the help into Ukraine. And then recently, we've been cooperating with a Ukrainian group called Repower, who bring doctors and nurses and medical personnel out of Ukraine up to Scandinavia for week-long, basically, R&R, but they get trained in many ways. But one of the key component for these 100 or so people that come up at a time are the saunas, and we've been helping them get saunas that they can use. And we're also working with. We've been working with the firefighters that have been fighting the LA fire, and we're providing tent saunas for some people. I can't really go into all the details right now because there's a lot of politics involved here. But so we've been providing tent saunas from Overland Sauna, and they've been very thankful because they're exposed to a lot of caustic chemicals when they're working as firefighters. There's a lot of stress. And these tent saunas that they're putting into their stations or different places have been very appreciated. So Sauna Aid is something, is it actually, there's the program that we're working on that we do, everyday things. And then there's just the idea, what we're trying to share is this idea that sauna or bath is not something, it's not a luxury. It's not something just, to be thought of as, it has a more proactive a position in the world where we can bring the bath to people in need. And it's this idea of the healing space of a sauna or a bathhouse. And we're trying to really open people's minds to that because there's a lot of focus now on the business aspect of building saunas and bathhouses and creating these spaces for people. Well, it's basically commercial aspect of it, which is really important. And I applaud all the people working in that space. And at the same time, we want to show that it's not just about a business. It's not just about creating a spa or a nice place for people to visit. We want to go out in the world with this healing power. So yeah, it's pretty important to me right now.
Yeah. So it's really exciting. And if people want to learn more about Sauna Aid, is there a site or a place that they can go to easily look up and be contributing?
Yeah, sauna-aid.com, and we're always looking for donations and looking for help, and just check out the website. It's all there.
Yeah, so
sauna-aid.com.
Okay, beautiful. You wrote a memoir called River in My Backyard.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it delves a bit into your personal and your family history and all that, and I wondered, just exploring your own narrative through this time, how has that sort of shaped your approach to storytelling and connecting to others? And you've done so much work in this realm of telling stories, and both on the show and in your book and in your memoir, really about your family. How did you become such a master storyteller, I guess is my question.
Wow, what a wonderful thing to say. And I'm blushing. Thank you. And obviously we've been talking about sauna and sweat and bathing, and that's one part of my life. It's a huge part of my life. I've done many books on different subjects. And I've oftentimes wondered, what's the connection? What am I looking for? And I think what I've come to understand is that I'm always looking for, I feel that things are really out of balance, whether it's on my own personal level or just out in the world. And I feel like what I try to do is help bring things back into some kind of balance. So when you're talking about, for example, the river book, The River in My Backyard, I had a horrible thing happen in my family. It was tragic. I don't need to go into the details, but everything is clearly out of balance, out of whack, crazy. So what can I do about that? So the book is an exploration of what to do when shit happens. Mm-hmm. And shit does happen, excuse my French, but everybody has shit happening. But what we do with it is critical. And so what I tried to do is I tried to show through my own exploration of bringing back wholeness in my life, tried to make a blueprint, if you will. I guess you can call it that. Mm-hmm. And I've also did that with another memoir I did called The Sword of Heaven. And that was really complicated because that had a lot to do, again, with my own personal life and a group of Japanese Shinto, the religion of Japan. It's not a religion, spirituality of Japan. And I got involved with a project in Japan that really took me around the world for almost 9 years doing very interesting work on their behalf. So again, that book itself is also another story of helping or trying to bring balance back in the world. And, what is a bath? The bath that we described earlier, the spiritual, social, physical, what is that doing? Bringing back wholeness, bringing back balance. So I guess you can say I do. There is a consistency in my work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
sure.
So beautiful. And when we look at the modern health challenges, the contemporary health challenges, the layers of stress, the environmental, the little black boxes of our phones going off all the time, and it's just integrating these traditional wellness practices, integrating sauna. what are the few key things you think that will contribute, like the growth of the sauna, the trajectory of the sauna culture and the hot, sweat lodges and all of that will contribute to course correcting some of these contemporary health challenges we have?
I always go out on a limb and I say the sauna sweat bath can save the world. And I say that and people look at me like I'm crazy, just like they said we were crazy to be shipping saunas down to Ukraine. These are people that don't understand how powerful this is. To be able to go into one space, one container, and have all those things I've talked about, spiritual, social, physical, happen. There's not any or very few human activities that will do that. When you bring people together like that, magic happens. Amazing things happen. Barriers break down. The Finns are famous for what's something called sauna diplomacy. And it's been used throughout much of the Cold War. The Finns were using sauna to talk to the Russian counterparts. And there's some things that happen between adversaries that won't happen in any other space. So the sauna diplomacy is just an example of how the bath can help us live together, live in peace together. So if this was something that was more integrated into our life, so we had a chance to meet people that were different than us in these safe environments, and safety is really important. That's a key element in all these bathhouses that are being created now. And I would emphasize this to any bathhouse operator, that at the top of their list, they need to make people feel safe. They need to feel comfortable. They can't be threatened in any way. So when people have that to experience, I think it changes the world. I think it's a game changer, and I think we need more of it. And I'm dedicated to helping bring that about.
Yeah, and it's the notion too of just like everyone in a towel, or like whether it's nudity or simply in a bathing suit, sort of takes the hierarchy of society out there, takes the jobs, I'm sure back in the day people had to leave their weapons outside. So that makes it makes such sense. And it's so funny, as you were speaking about this, I was thinking that I used to work for a libertarian organization in New Hampshire where we'd have people who were like sort of the arch enemies or in disagreements. We had a thing called an ice cream social, and it wasn't your traditional ice cream social. It was like a dedicated picnic bench where people would sit on opposite sides and they would get the ice cream sundae of their dreams delivered to them, the one that they picked. And the two people would sit across, and the requirement was you don't have to speak if you don't want to, but you need to sit with the person until your ice cream sundae is done. And it was really amazing to see how people actually sort of opened the door to reach across the aisle, to have conversations that in many cases, fostered either better relationships or reconnecting in a way that was like making up, or forgiving each other, or even just understanding each other's sides. And certainly that's just like the sugar and the how can you be really mad and sad when you have a beautiful ice cream sundae in front of you, perhaps. But the sauna adding this element of health and well-being. And I also think there's a bit of this, the pressure cooker that it is. Like, we used to have a sign at the place I worked with a big barrel sauna that was like, stories must have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Because it's really a barrel of truth. It's really, people are hot, they're opening up, they're feeling connected, and they're like speaking their own truth, knowing that also there's a limited time they get in that sauna before they need to take a break.
Right. It makes a container. And that's, again, any good story or any good art has its boundaries. And that's a good way to describe it. I like that. Yeah, certainly. What's wonderful, I go to the sauna almost every other day at the Dolphin Club. I'm a cold water swimmer in the bay. And what I've noticed is really nice. I mean, the sauna is probably the heart of the club, but if somebody starts telling a story that's really boring, nobody is bothered if you get up to leave, because everybody is coming and going. It's not insulting. It's like, I'm just too hot, I gotta go. But part of me is going, I'm leaving because this is really boring.
And you never have to really offend anyone.
And nobody's offended because they get it. It's like, I understand. Yeah, get out of here, cool off.
In the correlation of putting together all of this work and the shots and all the photos you took, especially in the early years, is there a picture that you feel like is one of your favorites, or your favorite that you've taken in the world of the sauna ritual or the banya, the heat rituals that you've seen?
Well, I'm a photographer, and so I have decided I'm going to reprint the sweat book but just as a facsimile book, so that you basically can get the hard copy of it as it was written in 1978 or published in 1978. But now I've been working on another book, which is more of a photo book. And it's a collection of photographs that I've taken while we were doing the Perfect Sweat series, and more up-to-date imagery, and more,
Cool.
years later, I hope I'm a better photographer than I was back in the 70s. And the book is called Naked Sweat, as opposed to Sweat and Perfect Sweat. I'm sticking with Sweat. And the book is not only these photographs of just mostly people, and I think there's a lot of ways people express themselves, but I love expressing what's happening in this space through people's faces, and you can just see the magic happening. And I have like some photographs of some Japanese women that had just come out of it's called a kamaburo. It's a kiln bath, and it was almost 300 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, we're talking extraordinary heat. They actually had to put protective clothing on. They came out, and I have this picture of one of their faces, and it's just she's almost 90 years old, and her skin is like a baby, and her sweat's pouring out, and the smile on her face. So I would say that in this book, Naked Sweat, I'm able to express a lot of how I feel, about what's happening inside all of us through my new photographs. And also the book itself it's me revealing myself in a way I didn't do with Sweat. I was in my 20s when I wrote Sweat, so I didn't have a lot of, original ideas. But now I have 50 years of experience, so I really feel like I can reveal more of myself. I can be more vulnerable. And so I hope that, that book will, complement my original book, Sweat, and the series. Perfect Sweat.
It sounds like it. It sounds like it will. Yeah, that's so wonderful. As I begin to sort of wrap us down in the hour, I like to close with a couple questions. I think the first one is really about looking ahead to the future and feeling into like these emerging trends and the practices. Are there some specific wellness or communal rituals that like are exciting you that you're seeing like added into this, the new dawn of the renaissance of sauna here in North America or even overseas?
Wow, yeah, that's a great question. And really, because I've been tracking just incredible growth in the sweat cultures in Norway, in Great Britain, and now in Ireland, just in the last 10 years, really up close personal. And I've watched how each one of those cultures has gone almost from 0 to 60, almost overnight. Norway, which had a bastu culture a long time ago, like the Finns, gave it up for a few hundred years, but they've come back roaring now. The Norwegians are doing bastu everywhere. They're very specialized in the floating bastu, the floating sauna. So I'm watching what's happening with the Norwegians grappling with the idea that they're borrowing and they're using a lot of the Finnish traditions but adding their own, because they realize they have their own cultural background, and they're mixing this fusion that's going on. It's really interesting to watch. And the same thing in Great Britain.
Cool. When you talk about floating saunas, you mean like sort of floating out on the body of water, not like the float tanks we have here in the States, right?
No, I'm sorry. They're floating. The original on the Oslo fjord. There were a few of them that just were illegal. People just built these saunas on rafts, and they were totally legal. And then they became one of the most. I think they are the most popular tourist attraction in Oslo. So suddenly the politics got behind it, and politicians and said, "Oh, okay." So they've got approvals now, but that was fun to watch how that they were basically pirate ships. So yeah, they float on water, and now we're starting to get some of them here. There's some new ones popping up in the North American scene as well, and they're pretty cool because they can move around, right?
Yeah. And I interrupted you. You were saying something about the UK.
UK is another example of a bathing. They had no bathing culture. I mean, the Brits were famous for not bathing. And 10 years ago, I remember this so clearly. There were two amazing human beings, Mika Meskin and Wendy Lau. They started the British Sauna Society, and I swear, I watched this thing like in real time explode, and now Great Britain has bathhouses everywhere. I'm going to the British Sauna Summit in May. It attracts hundreds of Brits. And they're taking on, it's kind of a fusion thing that's happening. They're rediscovering some of their own bathhouse history through for example, the Turkish bath was popular in the 19th century in London, very popular. So, and they were also looking at some of the other traditions. Ireland just last weekend had an Irish sweat house festival. And I was there. I was so lucky. I spent September a week with this woman, Rosanna Cooney, and I went around going all over Ireland, finding these old sweat houses that were really popular all over Ireland at one point.
Wow.
Rosanna's book is just coming out in May on this subject. But it's like all of a sudden the Irish are, they had the great forgetting after the famine, and now they're having the great remembering, and they're bringing back the Irish sweat house culture. It's just happening as we speak, literally.
Yeah, so
my
nice.
dream is, and it's happening in North America or in the U.S. There's going to be a time when people are going to be, it'll be the same kind of thing will happen. I think you'll find people reaching to Finland, they'll reach to Russia, they'll reach to different cultures, and then they'll go, wait a minute. North America, we have the Native American traditions. We have some of our own traditions. So there's going to be a blending that occurs that's going to be really interesting to watch. And some of it will be probably really bad. Well, hopefully.
Well, like all good experiments, like some of it's got to go awry for us to learn what works, and to each their own,
That's exciting. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, me too, for sure. And I just shout out to Deb, who works with her business is called Ananda, and she is one of the judges for like the UK Aufguss team and the British Sauna Society Connected, and she's the one who I flew out to this little wacky castle hotel style thing, like 3 hours outside of London, and said, I'm flying in to take this training, like teach me how to do towel waving and Aufguss and really understanding. And she was just such an excellent teacher for someone who came from America. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be a little clunky, but let's lean in. And then I'm sure that you've seen the posting in the group too, that there's going to be the USA Aufguss Championship that's coming. I just put an application in. Who knows? I mean, mostly I'm like, I don't know if I'm in it to win it. I'm in it to go meet all the people who are doing these amazing work, right? And just having done it for longer than I have. And so it's very exciting times coming, Mikkel. I think it's exciting times for us all.
Oh, I'm thrilled. Good for you.
So beautiful. I always close out with a similar question to all of my guests, which is really about you. If you could share advice, maybe this would be advice you'd be giving a listener perhaps now, but also really thinking in, if you could go back and tell 15-year-old Mikkel some piece of advice around health and well-being and connection to yourself, what would that piece of advice be?
You're asking me to talk to my 15-year-old? Well, I was embarrassed by my culture. My dad, we had to wear Norwegian hand-knit sweaters to school. Okay, that's embarrassing. I had to eat oily sardine sandwiches for lunch. Okay, that's pretty embarrassing. Okay, and I was taking these saunas at home, which it was embarrassing at first because I actually developed the ability to sweat profusely. So nobody wanted to guard me in the basketball games because I was drenched in sweat because I was in good shape sweating wise. So what I would say to people, to myself really is, hey, be proud of your heritage, embrace it. And it's going to be okay. Someday other people will look at that and say they want that. So that's just me speaking to myself and saying, it's okay. The sardines were good for you. And those sweaters were beautiful. And boy, that butt stew, it really led you down a path that brings you here, sitting here talking to you, Kristin, today. And I can't thank my father and my cultures enough for what it gave me. So yeah, gratitude.
Yeah, it was so beautiful. The things that you had when you were 15 that you were like, I don't know. Now everybody wants the sweater, the sauna. They want to have all the components that you had that were brought to the table. It's like the quirky things that I think then make us so interesting, right? Make us connect to other people in the long run. So what a beautiful piece of advice for everyone. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I want to encourage everybody to listen and to go watch The Perfect Sweat, to be able to pick up your book, both books. Is the other one's coming out soon, you said?
Hopefully in the fall. That's the
Okay.
plan, is to have a package where you can get both naked sweat and a facsimile of sweat by the fall.
So incredible. Great. You want to tell everyone where the best and easiest way to find you is if they want to look you up or chase you down, or maybe the next conference you'll be at where they can come see you speak?
Great. Well, I have a website. It's my name, mikkelaaland.com, and everything's there. And then I'll be at the British Sauna Summit in May, and lots of things coming up. But I really want to do another shout out, and you were so great to bring this up, to Sauna Aid. So please check out sauna-aid.com and help us out. We're doing good things, and that would be really meaningful to me if you did that.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing your time, your heart, and your sweat with us. We're so appreciative for all of that. And yeah, more to come. And I will make sure I list everything in the show notes, including everything to Sauna Aid, and we'll pump that up as well.
You've been wonderful. I've really had a good time here. Thank you.
Yeah, me too.